Welcome to the Efficio Spotlight podcast. My name is Simon Lipscomb. Again, this is part of our series of podcasts, particularly focused on what has been, let's be honest, a pretty unusual year, unprecedented period of time, I think particularly for people who work in procurement and supply chain. And I think underneath all the horrendous headlines and the difficulties many of us have had with this year, there are some really interesting stories and some really interesting impacts, both positive and negative. So we actually wanted to take some time to uncover some of those stories. So we're going to be talking to a few people over the next few podcasts about their experience of this year and what it's meant to them. And as part of that, we're delighted to be joined by Patrick Dunne, who is the Director of Property, Procurement and Cost Transformation at Sainsbury. So Patrick joined that business about 3 years ago. Previously worked in Walgreens, Boots and Nissan, also SIPS Leader of the Year and Team of the Year in 2019, and then Procurement Leaders Team of the Year in 2020, and then perhaps most impressive of all, star of the hit TV series Inside Sainsbury's. Patrick, just in terms of our discussion today, as we said, 2020, a completely unprecedented year. I remember you and I catching up, I think it was kind of February time, and was a very different world back then. I guess very quickly after that, everything changed. The world went into lockdown. And I think for supermarkets, that must have been a particularly interesting experience in a way where everyone else was worrying about what they do and how they slow things down. I guess overnight, you had to rethink everything. I mean, you were the organizations that had to stay open, people still needed to eat, and your retail experience on site had to change and your online experience had to change. It'd just be really interesting to perhaps go back to that period in March and those kind of announcements and what that was like, because I guess very quickly your life will have changed considerably and your priorities.
Yeah, it seemed an awful long time ago, but yet actually it was only less than 9 months ago. And a lot has changed since then even, but clearly a year that's been tragic in many ways. The people effect, society effect, and much of the effects of it still to come in maybe months, if not years ahead. But it's also been a pretty exciting and transformational time for different reasons. The work-life balance has changed forever, I think, in the way people approach remote working, as we used to call it, or work from home. The use of technology and how we use that over physical travel nowadays. We all miss a little bit of travel now, whereas in my career, I've spent 20 odd years traveling the world from Monday to Friday away from home. And I never thought I would miss it. 9 months at home, I'm now thinking, God, a little bit of travel would be nice again. Looking back to March, and Sainsbury's being in the grocery sector, I described in various conversations in the past, many industries had to scale back very, very quickly. And that was one set of actions and activities. And other industries had to ramp up pretty quickly, grocery particularly. And of course, you had lots of things in the media about panic buying and stuff. But the reality of it was overnight, we closed down entertainment and restaurants. You weren't at the workplace anymore. And so you weren't buying your lunch at Pret a Manger or other facilities. All of that overnight goes into the supermarket channel. And so you have unprecedented demand. And the good news is that I think the way we reacted, the business is very agile anyway. Grocery is very agile day to day, meeting consumer needs and demands, but also our supply chains are pretty agile. We source from over 70, 80 countries, dual sourcing in many regards. As I say to people, pineapples and bananas only come from certain regions of the world. You need to keep them coming. Or more importantly, wine. If you like your Australian wine, it comes from Australia. Your French, it's from France. But we managed to keep that going, and that's a testament to how agile our relationships are and our supply chains are, not just in Sainsbury's but across grocery. But I think the real point of this conversation is how procurement reacted, both public and private sector, because I think it is the coming of age of a procurement organization this year for all sorts of reasons. But the ability to get our supply chains to react, whether in a scaling back supply or growing supply overnight, has been testament to great procurement and great supply chains around the world. And the fact that we haven't had panic buying, we haven't had food shortages, is testament to the grocery sector, particularly in our ability to continue and give confidence to the UK public that food will continue to flow through our supply chains in a safe environment for both customers. Because my job, particularly looking at my property role, but linked with procurement, was I had to stand up, a safe environment overnight for our stores. And to give you one little example, on the Thursday, I think it was around about March 17th, if I can recall correctly, But we decided that we needed some form of screen in stores to allow colleagues to feel safe. Prototyped it over the weekend, sourced the perspex on a Tuesday, and had a rollout the following Thursday, a 7-day turnaround. And something like 4 weeks later, we'd installed over 20,000 screens across both the UK and Ireland. And that's just one project of probably hundreds of the same magnitude. Again, testament to the agility, but also it showed that procurement could really step forward and lead major solutions, whether it was PPE or hand sanitizers or standing up, marshalling for stores and car parks. So yeah, it was a great, crazy time, 16-hour days. But as I have a very young team, they learned so much. The experiences they had was pretty crazy at times. Just the feedback from them about how they learned on the job really rapidly, and some of them got 2 or 3, 5 years of experience inside about a 3-month period. It seems an awful long time ago, but it's not that long really when you think.
No. And what was it like in that period? Because I guess, again, uniquely to supermarkets, again, almost overnight, you must have had this huge growth in online, and then all of the associated challenges, even the demand signals and the kind of customer behavior must have been completely different.
Everybody doesn't realize is that the government did a really good job of rallying the industry under Feed the Nation. And you'll hear a lot about business rates, but the government decided to relieve business rates for the grocery sector and non-essential retail, fundamentally so that we could concentrate on feeding the nation. And so we invested, hundreds of millions of pounds in our stores, but not just in physical assets, but resources such as vans and colleagues to drive the vans, because we upscaled our grocery online business from about roughly just 300,000 orders. We're now sitting at about 700,000 orders a week, en route 800,000. And that necessitates an awful lot of capacity, both in stores, in picking, in delivery, in systems to support it. And those were some of the hundreds of projects that were rapidly procurement mobilized, and my property function really stood up a lot of them, along with lots of other colleagues in the business. But it was really, if you think about why it was done, it wasn't just to sell more food. It was to support the vulnerable and those that were isolated. Probably half of that capacity was earmarked specifically for vulnerable customers that the government was directing us toward. So it was less about purely selling food. It was more providing a civic duty and a service. And that's what helped motivate a lot of people to work through the long hours and the long days, because it wasn't just about building a capacity to make money. It was about servicing a nation and supporting really vulnerable colleagues and customers in whatever way we could to either keep them safe or to make sure that food got to their doors because they were isolated.
Yeah, as we kind of sit here in December and looking back over this period of time, accepting it's been horrendous on so many levels with so many people, but are there positives that have come from this experience? I mean, for you and your team? And
had a number of adverse things in my life over the years, and I grew up in Northern Ireland in the 70s and 80s, and surrounded by a lot of adversity. But the one thing about people from Northern Ireland is they always see the positives, because you have to believe there is positives. And likewise in this situation, you could dwell an awful lot on the negatives, and there has been many, as I said earlier, huge effect on people's mental state, but also physically. People are no longer with us. But you look at the positives, and there is many. Transformation of the way we work. Now, not everybody likes it. There is the social interaction side of working in an office, which we all miss, that's for sure. But I think if I look at my own situation, I would leave home on a Monday morning at about 5 a.m. and come home on a Friday evening about 7 or 8. I don't miss that one bit.
Yeah.
And I'm covering more areas, more subject matter. I'm more productive in a way of working where I'm working from home. I was looking there at a little quote there. I don't know it exactly, but Lord of the Rings, Gandalf, he finishes one of the movies about, the age of man is now coming. The age of procurement, I think, this year particularly has put procurement at the forefront. If it wasn't already, and I know in some companies procurement is very advanced and very in the mind's eye of the CFO and the CEO, and they're integral to decision making. But if it wasn't, I think now procurement has really become of age, and as many of our colleagues in parts of the business community are seeing the real value that great procurement, great supply chains can bring. It's not something that is just a one-off. I think now procurement leaders and functions need to really embed that as the new way of working, and showing the true value of procurement, not just a service provider, but a real value add to a business, not just in in adding monetary value, but in risk protection, supply chain security, and all the things that has happened in the last 9 months has proven that great procurement is important and critical in any business. And that allows leaders and people to aspire to greater roles within procurements, whereas maybe in the past that aspiration wasn't there. Whether it be graduates or people starting out in their career, they now probably see procurement as something way more critical. I hate to use the word sexy, but it is a bit more sexier than it was in the past because of the last 9 months in particular.
Do you see your role in the Sainsbury's business as having fundamentally been changed by this period, or is it more of a continuation of the basic principles and all the things that you guys were doing previously before?
Yeah, I think for us in Sainsbury's, we've been on a journey, never miss an opportunity, but we are the SIPS team of the year, Now, we've been on a journey building a capability and a team that is already well integrated into the ways of working of Sainsbury's and driving a lot of the change agenda in many parts of the business. And so for us, I think it is more of the same and continuing to add that value. I think for procurement in general, I think you look at the public sector and the private sector, I think generally it is a great opportunity for procurement. If it wasn't already in the center of decision making, it's a great opportunity now for leaders to cement themselves in there and make sure that they're adding that value across their business. So for those, as I say, that are already well advanced, there'll be benefits, there'll be improvements, but I think it's more to those functions that maybe weren't as valued in their business that can now kick on from this experience. I think the next frontier for me really is focus on Sainsbury's is the role of procurement and supply chains in the environmental agenda, and particularly a major program at net zero by 2040 in Sainsbury's, of which I personally lead the carbon side, being property and procurement. But the role of procurement and the role of supply chains helping us bring innovation and taking the lead really on the net zero agenda, really the CSR agenda.
I think the positive take on this difficult period is that potentially those issues on, CSR and environmental have been accelerated and really are now at the forefront. I mean, do you think that's true, or do you think that's kind of people being still a little bit wishful thinking, and actually for lots of companies there's still quite a long way to go on this?
For everybody, there's a long way to go for sure. But what I've seen in the last 12 to 18 months is many corporates now really facing into the compelling problem that is their carbon footprint, particularly. Not just directly, but indirectly. For us in Sainsbury's, we generate 2 million tons of carbon a year. And I, with the teams, will lead a program to try and eliminate that over the next 10, 20 years. And we're standing behind that with, a substantial investment of 50 million a year into our carbon agenda. But I'm seeing more and more businesses step forward to lead on that. And I think that has to be a good thing, that has to be welcomed. But you can't do it on your own. It is about collaboration. It is about industries such as automotive industry, really helping us get there, the refrigeration industry, making breakthroughs in technology that will help us be able to procure the right technologies to help reduce our carbon footprint. So there's a lot to do. But again, it stems from great procurement can have a major role there of going out and seeking those innovations, going out and encouraging those industries to develop the technologies, because we will be there to adopt them.
With your role, Patrick, and particularly, I guess, on the property side of things, for next year, do you think business will go back to pretty much as it was before, the mix of people shopping in your stores as opposed to online, or?
I think no, and I can see it. Now, we own the Argos business, and of course, we've announced that we will shutter 300 Argos stores over the next 3 years. 400. We've already closed 100 of them. Why is that? Because we're seeing huge percentage of people who start life in Argos on a digital platform who actually pay for the product. And actually, we have a very great supply chain that can fast track deliver to our customers in under 4 hours. Or you can pick up from an Argos store in a Sainsbury's supermarket. So the use of the physical estate, standalone estate for Argos, we don't see a future for it because customers are telling us they don't want to shop in that way. So the digital approach to things, Sainsbury's Click and Collect and our grocery online business, as I say, we've grown from 300,000 to nearly 800,000 orders a week. Those customers are finding a new way of shopping that they're comfortable with. And so long as we can deliver the value, the quality and the service, they'll continue to shop in that way. But the role of the supermarket is critical to that because, I won't go into too much of the science, but we pick our grocery online from the supermarket shelves. through the night and delivered from the store to be closer to your customers rather than a dark warehouse somewhere in the middle of England and then trunking it through the night, on lorries. And so the role of physical stores is adopting to be, yes, customers still come in to do their shop, but also designing and building and reforming them inside to be able to accommodate for a grocery online business and an Argos store-in-store business, so that Sainsbury's or a supermarket becomes more of a destination for multiple missions. We have a very active concession business where we have 64 Specsavers, we have 100 odd Timpsons in our stores. We have a platform of partners that take space in our supermarkets. And now we're adding over 300 Argos store-in-stores into those stores as well. So you get more reasons to shop at a supermarket. But digital is the way forward. But digital aligned with bricks and mortar is the key. Digital only, it's not bricks and mortar only. It's the two are symbiotic as far as we're concerned, and particularly in the supermarket business. And we're now reforming our store footprints inside the box to accommodate that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to do going into next year, but a lot of learnings that are shaping the next generation of what supermarket design looks like in the future.
And perhaps to close, Patrick, I mean, again, accepting that 2020 has been a terrible year in lots of ways, but you're the guy from Northern Ireland, always looks on the bright side. I mean, are there things you've been grateful for this year or that you've seen that have pressed you?
Yeah, me personally, your health. I've remained healthy throughout that time. And so you have to be grateful for that. And my family has. So I'm a great believer in family and friends. And so touch wood, everybody stays safe. But to be grateful, I think any tragedy, allows you to reflect and think about what's important to you as an individual. And I, for one, have reflected a lot about, work in general and where my career has taken me, which has been an amazing career personally. And I've enjoyed every minute of it. But it makes me realize about giving back more to society and to the profession. I've had a lot of interaction with the public sector in the last 6 months about how maybe I could support there in ways that maybe I can't talk too much about now, but just, how procurement could be more effective in the public sector. Looking at the profession, mentoring various individuals, because this has been a wholly new experience for my team particularly, but for a lot of people who've never experienced a sort of difficult time as they've had. You've heard stories of your grandfather, going through the world wars, and many of us had the recession of 2008. But actually, there's a generation of young procurement and young workers who've never experienced anything like that, and so helping them deal with it. Some of the highlights for me is just the way the team has rallied around the social side in a virtual way. We've had so much fun. Actually, we've learned so much about each other as individuals. And I know everybody's been doing it, when it starts with a coffee roulette, but it really has been, for me, I'm a little older than most, but getting to know everybody in my team, not just in the work we do, but just seeing them in their new, not only their work environment, but their home environment at the same time, their dogs, their kids, their wives, their husbands. Something you don't get to do on a normal basis. Reflection would be the key message I'd say. Everybody should take the time to reflect as we go into Christmas and the new year, and how we're going to make the next year it has to be better for sure, but it may not change a lot. The COVID-19 may not disappear overnight. And so we have to make the best of it and see the positives of what it means for you as an individual and your team and your company, depending on what your outlook is. But I for one, I'm looking forward to next year. And I'm not expecting too much change in the way of working in at least the next 6 months, but just more of the same, and keeping the procurement agenda, the property agenda right at the forefront of what we're doing, and being agile, quick decision making, being assertive of how we get things done is some of the lessons from this year that we want to avoid the bureaucratic corporate maybe way we might have had in previous years. Yeah, look on the bright side, as they say. There has to be one. If there isn't one, we're all doomed.
So Patrick, thank you so much. It feels like a good place to draw the conversations to close.
Thank you. And hopefully people listen beyond the first 10 minutes. They don't get too bored with our conversation.
We really appreciate it. Fascinating story. As I say, we'll be having more conversations, looking at some other industries over the course of the next few podcasts. But no, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. We're publishing the next podcast in due course.
Thanks, Simon.